George Washington was born on February 22, 1732, on a tobacco plantation in Westmoreland County, Virginia. His parents, Augustine and Mary Ball Washington, raised him and his 5 younger siblings in a busy farm household. From a young age, George showed a quiet curiosity. He wandered through the rows of green tobacco plants, watched his father guide the workers, and listened carefully to each lesson his father shared. Augustine Washington taught George the value of honesty and hard work. He would walk beside his son in the fields and point to a fallen leaf or a leaning fence post. "A man of truth can stand in any storm," he said. George remembered these words and carried them in his heart. He practiced honesty by admitting small mistakes to his parents. He practiced hard work by rising before dawn to carry water and feed the animals. When George was 11, his father became very ill and died. The loss shook the family deeply. George felt the weight of sorrow and responsibility on his young shoulders. His mother, Mary, needed help managing the plantation and caring for his younger brothers and sisters. Despite his grief, George stepped forward. He guided the field workers when his mother called for him, checked fences for damage after storms, and ensured that the daily tasks continued without pause. Even with these new duties, George never lost his love for learning. He did not attend a large school, but he found books whenever he could. The Fairfax family, neighbors, and family friends lent him volumes on mathematics and geography. At dusk, by the light of a simple candle, he read about distant lands and numbers that measured the world. He practiced each lesson carefully, eager to understand. Outside, after his chores were done, George often sat in the dirt and drew maps with a stick. He marked the plantation's fields, the winding river, and the forest edge. He measured the distance between trees by pacing and counted his steps. Sometimes he gathered small stones and sticks to build models of houses and barns. These models were his first work in design and planning. At night, George would lie on a soft patch of grass and watch the sky. He gazed at the stars, bright points of light in the dark. He wondered what lay beyond Virginia's forests. He dreamed of adventures in faraway places and hoped to use his skills to help people. The stars became his silent friends, offering comfort and sparking his imagination. Through these quiet hours, George learned to listen to his own thoughts. He wrote small notes in a simple notebook he kept close. He sketched trees and fields, noted the changing seasons, and sometimes wrote a few lines about how he felt. Writing helped him understand his own heart and shaped his early sense of purpose. George's childhood taught him many lessons. He learned that honesty formed the strongest foundation, like a fence post set deep in the ground. He learned that hard work, even in small tasks, built character and prepared him for greater challenges. He learned that loss could bring responsibility and growth, and that curiosity could light the darkest nights. As he grew older, these experiences guided him. The lessons of his father, the support of his mother, the borrowed books, his maps drawn in the dirt, and his quiet dreams beneath the stars all came together. They became the seeds of the leader he would one day become. George's early years showed that a humble beginning, paired with steady determination and a caring heart, could lead to truly great things. And so, the boy who dreamed big would go on to shape a nation, guided always by the simple truths he learned on the plantation. When George Washington turned 17, he took his first important job. William Fairfax, a family friend, offered him work as a land surveyor. Every day, George set out before sunrise with a simple kit: a compass to find directions, a metal chain to measure distances, paper to draw maps, and a small notebook to record his thoughts. He walked through dense forests, climbed over fallen logs, and forded cold streams. Each survey showed him new faces, from farmers tending fields to animals grazing in the shade. His maps became guides for future settlers, but they also captured George's growing skills in careful measurement and clear thinking. George kept his notebook close to his heart. On quiet evenings, he opened it and wrote about more than land boundaries. He noted the whisper of wind through the trees, the sparkle of morning dew on a spider's web, and the excitement he felt when a new view appeared after climbing a hill. These words helped him understand his own feelings and shaped his vision for the future. When George's older half-brother Lawrence fell gravely ill and died, George joined the Virginia militia. At first, the position seemed honorific, but it soon required real action. His first mission was a diplomatic one: deliver a letter to the French commanders, politely asking them to leave British-held territory. The journey proved dangerous. At one river crossing, the icy water knocked George off his feet, and he struggled to his knees before crawling out, soaked and shivering. Later, on a narrow trail, a small group of French-allied Native Americans launched an ambush. George's heart pounded as arrows sang through the trees, but he kept calm. He guided his horse behind thick brush and waited until the attackers had passed before carefully riding to safety. That night, by the light of a small fire, George wrote in his notebook, "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the strength to go on despite it." He slept beneath a blanket and dreamed of home, but also of standing tall when challenges came. Soon after, George led his men into the Battle of Jumonville Glen. A sudden clash surprised the French detachment, and the enemy commander was killed. The man fell to the forest floor, and the skirmish ended almost as quickly as it began. Although the fight was short, it showed George that violence came with heavy costs. He spent hours after the battles were still helping wounded soldiers. He tore strips of linen into bandages, bound aching limbs, and offered water to those who could not lift their heads. He knelt beside frightened young recruits, placed a steady hand on their shoulders, and whispered, "We stand together, and we will face what comes." Despite this early success, George's next encounter did not go well. At Fort Necessity, the French forces outnumbered his tired troops. Mud soaked their boots, and rain pelted their thin tents. After a hard day of fighting, George realized he could not hold the position. He accepted terms of surrender, a bitter lesson for the young commander. The defeat drove him back to camp, where he walked alone in the rain, feeling each drop as a reminder of his failure. Yet by dawn he made a silent promise. He would learn from every mistake, prepare more carefully, and never lose hope. Back in Virginia, George's reputation grew when he joined General Edward Braddock's expedition against French forts. The expedition moved along dusty roads, horses and wagons creaking under the summer sun. At the Battle of Monongahela, British regulars charged into the trees without warning. Braddock fell, struck by a musket ball, and chaos swept the ranks. George seized control. Bullets tore through his coat, but he stood firm. He shouted clear orders, rallied the frightened soldiers, and organized an orderly retreat. His calm voice cut through panic like a beacon in the night. Many lives were saved because he refused to abandon his post. When the guns fell silent, fellow officers praised George's leadership, and his men cheered his name. The day's victory lay not in a captured fort, but in the lives preserved through steadiness and courage. Through these years, George learned that leadership required both skill and kindness. He continued to write in his notebook, now adding reflections on hope, fear, and the bonds formed with his comrades. He made time to comfort soldiers who had lost friends in battle, and he rested his hand on the shoulder of anyone who seemed overwhelmed. His genuine care won his men's loyalty and inspired them to follow him even in the darkest hours. These experiences shaped George Washington's character. From surveying quiet forest glades to commanding troops under fire, he learned resilience in the face of fear, the power of empathy in moments of pain, and the need for calm, clear decisions when others faltered. The lessons he gathered in his notebook and his heart prepared him for greater trials ahead. In the fields and on the battlefield, the boy who once drew maps in the dirt had become a leader with skill, courage, and a caring soul. When the French and Indian War ended, George Washington returned home to Mount Vernon. The mansion he inherited was small and plain, but George had a grand vision. He added new rooms, built a 2-story porch overlooking the Potomac River, and painted the walls a warm colonial red. He experimented on the land, planting wheat instead of tobacco to rest the soil. He built a grist mill to grind grain and a small distillery to make spirits for trade. Each change showed his care for the land and his hope that hard work could bring both beauty and profit. At Mount Vernon, George found love and partnership with Martha Dandridge Custis. Martha was a widow with 2 young children, and George welcomed them into his home without hesitation. Each year they planted a tree in the garden to mark their growing family. George kept a small wooden box filled with gifts from soldiers, carved tokens, letters of thanks, and simple maps drawn by young recruits. Seeing those tokens reminded him of his duty and the bonds he had formed in the army. Their marriage was a source of comfort and strength through the quiet days. When tensions rose again with Britain, George felt the call to serve his country. In 1775, the Continental Congress asked him to lead the new Continental Army. He accepted with humility, saying he sought only to serve and would accept no salary beyond his expenses. He wrote in a personal letter, "I want peace, not power." With that promise, he set aside his peaceful life to guide an army made of farmers, shopkeepers, and young men who had never held a rifle. The winter at Valley Forge was the darkest hour of the Revolutionary War. Snow piled high and food, clothing, and medicine ran low. Many soldiers fell ill, and morale dipped. George refused to leave the camp. He stood with his men in the cold, helped chop wood, and fetched water. To lift spirits, he invited his officers to read poetry by candlelight in the mess tent, reminding them of home. Under the direction of Baron von Steuben, George drilled his troops in new tactics, transforming them into a disciplined force. By spring, they marched out stronger and more united. In October 1781, George led a combined force of American and French soldiers to Yorktown. French ships blocked the harbor, and British General Cornwallis found himself trapped. After days of siege, the British surrendered. George knelt in the dirt, tears welling in his eyes as he thanked his soldiers and allies. The victory at Yorktown was a triumph of strategy, courage, and cooperation. It brought hope that the long struggle for independence would soon end. True to his belief in service over power, George resigned his commission in 1783 and returned to Mount Vernon. He surprised many by refusing to seize political control. In 1787, however, delegates to the Constitutional Convention persuaded him to preside over their debates in Philadelphia. His steady presence helped guide them to compromise and draft the Constitution. When the new government formed, George was the unanimous choice for the first presidency. He served 2 terms, establishing key precedents, creating an executive cabinet, maintaining neutrality in foreign wars, and stepping down after 8 years. After leaving office in 1797, George returned once more to Mount Vernon. He spent his days farming experimenting with crop rotations, and writing letters to friends and leaders. He and Martha enjoyed long walks by the river, leaning on each other's arms. In December 1799, after a sudden illness, George Washington passed away at his beloved home. The nation mourned deeply. Bells tolled, flags flew at half-mast, and people from all 13 states paid tribute. In the years since, monuments, place names, and the capital city of Washington, D.C., have kept his memory alive. His legacy endures as a testament to humility, courage, and the belief that true leadership is service to others. George Washington's life was a remarkable journey from a curious boy on a Virginia plantation to the first president of the United States. Born in 1732, he learned honesty and hard work from his father. When his father died, George helped his mother run the farm and cared for his siblings. He studied books on math and geography, drew maps in the dirt, and dreamed of helping others. As a young man, George worked as a land surveyor. He measured forests and streams, and he wrote down his feelings in a small notebook. When his brother died, he joined the Virginia militia. He faced danger on missions, met fear with courage, and cared for wounded soldiers after battle. At Jumonville Glen, he showed kindness to injured men. At Fort Necessity, he learned from defeat and vowed to prepare better. At Monongahela, he saved many lives by keeping calm under fire. After the French and Indian War, George returned home to Mount Vernon. He improved his land, tried new crops, and built mills. He married Martha Dandridge Custis and welcomed her children as his own. When the American colonies declared their rights, George left his peaceful life to lead the Continental Army. In the biting cold of Valley Forge, he stood with his troops, shared their hardships, and used poetry readings to lift their spirits. With new training, his army became strong. In 1781, George's careful planning and the help of French allies won the Battle of Yorktown. The British surrendered, and America's independence was near. George then stepped down as general and returned to Mount Vernon, showing he valued service over power. In 1787, he guided the writing of the U.S. Constitution. In 1789, he became president, set key examples by forming a cabinet, staying neutral in foreign wars, and retiring after 2 terms. George's life teaches us that honesty, hard work, and caring for others can bring great change. He showed that true leaders serve their people, learn from mistakes, and remain humble. Today, we can follow his example by telling the truth, working with dedication, and showing kindness even in hard times. When we face challenges, we can remember George's courage and keep moving forward. Congratulations on improving your English listening and understanding by following George Washington's story. To test your memory, answer this quick question in the comments. Which lesson from George's life speaks to you most? A. Learning from mistakes helps us grow. B. Serving others with kindness makes us better leaders. Please comment A or B below. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel for more inspiring English learning content. Your support gives us the motivation to continue creating quality material. If you can, please consider donating to help cover our costs and keep this free service available. Thank you for learning with us.